Welcome to our wild and precious lives and our dogs. Today, I'll be talking to a former student of mine, Morgan. Morgan was a gold student in the recall class I teach at FDSA. I'm a wordy person, and my gold and silver threads often veer off in unexpected directions. This happened in Morgan's case as well. From recalls, we got to talking about training philosophies, and Morgan shared how hers had changed from one extreme, maybe to the other extreme. And she was wondering, in fact, if she had gone too far in the other direction. But I'll let her tell her story herself. Morgan, thank you so much for discussing this topic with me on the podcast. I believe the conversation we're about to have will be a helpful one for many listeners who may be or have been in a similar position as you and Travis. But first of all, Morgan, please introduce yourself, your pronouns, your dogs, very importantly, and anything else you'd like to share about yourself and your life.
Hey everyone, my name is Morgan. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm fortunate to live in the beautiful state of Virginia, which is in the eastern United States. I currently have two dogs. I have Mikey, who is about an 11-year-old lab Coonhound mix and is a very good boy. He's one of those dogs that's just kind of naturally well-behaved, never really needed much in the way of training. And then I have Travis, who I guess is going to be the main focus on today's podcast, who is a coonhound. He's maybe 5 or 6 years old. He is not stupid, but he does choose to reserve most of his brain power for hunting. So he can be a little bit more challenging to work with sometimes.
Yeah, and I had the pleasure of meeting Travis in Calling All Dogs. I always love the dogs that fall outside of the cookie cutter approach spectrum because they make me grow as a trainer too, and they make me think. And Travis is definitely one of those dogs. So I had a lot of fun trying together with you to figure out how to best explain that it might be worth coming back when you call him, even if even if there's something to hunt around, or maybe even if there's a very comfy couch competing for his attention. I remember you were trying to play recall games with him, and he was just chilling on the couch, and he was like, "Well, I'm not sure it's worth getting off this couch right now."
Yes, it can be very difficult to dislodge Travis from the couch when he has settled in for a good nap. And the other big challenge with him and recall is, he is a hound. So he's always trying to sniff after critters. And if he is on a scent, it can be, I feel like sometimes he doesn't even hear me. He's just very focused on his nose.
Yeah, he reminds me a little bit of my first dog, who was a dachshund.
Yep.
I got him as an adult. I found him on the street and we looked for the owner, but didn't find anyone. So I kept him. And he was definitely the most challenging dog I've ever had. So now I have Malinois who are very biddable and want to do my bidding no matter what. And the reason I do is because of him.
That's so funny because I feel that I could handle a dachshund, but I cannot think of a dog breed that I feel less equipped to handle than a Malinois.
That's so funny. No, I feel like training is so easy because they want to train, they want to please you, or at least the ones I've had. Of course, there are exceptions. We're always working with individuals, but houndy dogs are more different because to me anyways, they feel more difficult to me because they have many other interests.
Yeah.
Maybe they would like to please you some of the time, but it's not always their first priority.
I mean, if he doesn't have anything else going on, he's a pretty good sport. He'll do what I want, but it's definitely not one of his top 3 priorities in life.
Yeah, exactly. Travis is the kind of dog who I very much enjoy training vicariously through my students' dogs and my dad's drivey hunting dogs. But I wouldn't necessarily pick these breeds as my own breed. I love the problem solving and thinking outside the box and the riddles dogs like Travis come up with. But then I also love coming home to my highly biddable males.
Yeah.
So to take it back to recalls, I think like me, you really enjoy off-leash hiking and camping and being out with your dogs for a long time. How did you use to train your dogs for off-leash hiking in the past?
So I would teach them, what come means with food,
Hmm.
start with just cookies until I felt like, okay, they know what it means. And until if we were just in the house or the yard, they would come, 100 times in a row, no mistake. And then once I'd done that, I would put a shock collar on them, take them out. And if I said, come, or here is the word I used to use. If I said here and they didn't come, I would give them a shock with the shock collar. And then I would just, say, come again, give them a second chance. They would usually come. And at that point, give them a cookie, just like they'd done it on the first try.
And how did they usually respond when you push the button for the shock collar?
So they never like yelped or anything. I didn't have to use that high of a level. My first dog, Jesse, was a Coonhound pit mix, and he would just like almost seem exasperated. Like he no visible reaction to the shock, like he didn't flinch or yelp or anything, but he'd just kind of be like, oh, fine, and like slowly amble towards me, like, okay, look, I came. Can I go do my thing now?
So even without you repeating the cue, with the shock itself, give him the
Um,
information to come back, or was that only your second cue?
I'm trying to remember because this was all like over 10 years ago now. I think after the first couple times, he kind of got it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, okay, like if I don't come, I'm gonna get shocked, and then she's gonna say come again. So after a while, the shock itself, he would
Mm-hmm.
come. And it never, I mean, I want to say the training was pretty effective because after the first couple months, I found that I never really needed to reach for the shock. Jesse passed away in 2020. And I'd say for like the last 7 years we were together, it was like a rare thing for me to have to push the shock button like once a year, maybe less often.
Yeah. So the immediate response to the shock was just to stop, or would they keep going until your second come signal or here?
I'm trying to remember because it was a long time ago. I think he would at least stop
Mm-hmm.
with the shock and then either come right then or come the second time that I called him.
Yeah, yeah.
Little Mikey was even easier to train. I think I've given him a grand total of like 3 shocks in his life. He reacted a little more to the shock than Jesse did. He never yelped or jumped or anything, but you'd see him kind of put his ears back, like, ooh, I didn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to call him a second time. He would always just hustle right to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so the first time they were wearing that collar was after you had trained the recall with food and you were going out into the mountains around wildlife.
I put the collar on them for like all of our training sessions. I just so they would kind of get used to it,
Mm-hmm.
but I never used it until I felt like they had a really good understanding of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would practice, not out in the mountains, just at the time we were living in an apartment complex that had like a big kind of grassy area where people could let their dogs, run around off leash. And there were squirrels there. So I took them out on a long line.
Yeah.
When they saw a squirrel, called them. And when they inevitably blew me off to chase the squirrel, being hound dogs, that's when they got their first shock.
Ah, yeah, 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 yeah. And with dogs like Mikey
Yeah.
and Jessie, would you keep the collar on in any case for all their lives, even if you didn't use it anymore? Or would you only have it on in a certain training phase and then take it off and not put it on again?
The collars that I have also have a GPS tracking function that I like to have just like for
Ah, yeah,
emergencies because you never know what might
yeah,
happen. They are hound dogs, so they do range pretty far from me when we're in remote areas. If we're really in the middle of nowhere, sometimes I'd let them get like up to a mile away.
yeah.
So if they did, ever injure themselves or get stuck, I'd want to be able to go find them. So I kept the collar on, for tracking purposes. If it didn't have the tracking function, I probably would have always kept it on Jesse because he did kind of have a I don't want to say stubborn, but he was a little more like Travis in that making mom happy is not always his first priority.
Mm-hmm.
For Mikey, if I had another way to track him, I probably would not keep the collar on at this point. But, I do use it just because, if he gets into trouble out there, I want to be able to go find him.
Yeah, that's for sure a super convenient function to have. So this is not at all, the shock collar training approach is not at all the one you took with Travis, because that's not how I teach recalls in calling all dogs. What made you go down a different path or explore a different path for Travis?
So, I had heard of, aversive fallout, like you use an aversive method on a dog and then bad things happen, like they can get fearful or aggressive. I'd heard of that, but because I never saw really any hints of that with Jesse and Mikey, I was kind of like, oh, the people that see that, they're probably using too high of a shock, or they didn't do enough foundation work to make sure their dog really knew what the command meant before they punished them. So I don't think that's a real thing. I think if you see that, you probably messed up somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Travis proved me wrong pretty well. I never used a shock collar on Travis, but I did put a prong collar on him to try to teach him to stop pulling because he pulls like a freight train. That's why these days he's such a great canicross partner.
Ah, yeah. Smart way of turning an unwanted behavior in an advantage. Yeah.
Yes. So, we did all the things, like we started on a leash in the house, then we went in the yard, then we would be, in the yard with like some minor distractions, just teaching him not to pull. And he was doing pretty well. So I thought, okay, I think it's time. He knows what he's supposed to do on a leash. It's time I can put the prong collar and introduce some consequences. So I put the prong collar on him, took him out for a walk. He was trying to go sniff something in the bushes, probably a critter, and he hit the end of the leash and kept pulling. So I gave him a pop with the prong collar.
Mm-hmm.
Not even, I didn't yank his paws off the ground or anything. It was just a little poop. I didn't, really rip into him with the collar or anything like that.
Yeah.
Oh, but bless his heart, he had such a big reaction to that. He immediately kind of crouched down to the ground. He tucked his tail. He had his head very low, like almost resting on the ground, and he kind of turned his head and his whole body away from me, just very like submissive, don't hurt me body language.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt really bad, obviously, about that. So immediately, took the prong collar off of him. And then the worst part was not just his initial reaction to the collar correction. It was that for several days after that, as soon as I attached a leash to his collar, he froze.
Oh, yeah.
It took me, several days of like putting a leash on him and then throwing pieces of cheese for him to realize, okay, it's safe to move when I have this attached to me.
Yeah.
That's not a reaction that I'd seen before. With Jesse and Mikey, I popped him with the collar and they were like, oh, sorry, my bad, I'll stop pulling. And I was able to transition them off of the prong collar within like 2 weeks for Mikey and probably 2-3 months for Jesse. And then didn't need to use the prong anymore after that.
Yeah.
So with Travis, I was like, okay, obviously this isn't going to work. Need a different approach. So started learning more about teaching with positive reinforcement, which I kind of already knew about that. I never used a prong collar to teach them, hey, this is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Once I felt like they knew that expectation, I would then use the aversives to correct them and be like, no, hey, you actually do have to do what I tell you to, even if there's something else you'd rather do. Yeah. So I kind of already knew how to train with positive reinforcement. It's just, Travis made me learn how to go farther with it.
Yeah, because at some point you run into the issue with the squirrel, for example, right?
Always going to be critters around.
Right. Yeah. And if you don't have a tool to correct them, you need to know how to go further.
Yeah.
On a positive reinforcement approach.
For sure.
Yeah. So after the experience with the prong collar, you decided that you're not going to use the shock collar for the recall either?
Yes. I test everything on myself before I put on my dogs. And I check my shock collar regularly to make sure that they're working. So I've actually probably shocked myself with the collars like 100 times more often than I've shocked my dog, just because I check them weekly and I've never shocked a dog anywhere near that often.
Yeah.
And, I also like, hey, what does it feel like? The prong collar on myself. And the prong collar is less painful than the shock collar. So I was like, okay, if he has this reaction to the prong collar, I'm just not even going to consider the shock collar.
Yeah.
The only thing I did try was when he was really focused on a scent. I did try just the vibrate setting on the collar, which is not painful. It's just like it just vibrates. Just to see if that could kind of like break his focus on the scent and then he'd be able to hear me calling him. It did nothing. He didn't react to it in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, that's really interesting. Sorry, my dog is trying to join our conversation. Put a cone on her because she hurt herself the other day. She's currently trying to get the cone off and say hello. You want to say hello? That's game.
Oh, she's beautiful.
Thank you. Just to go back, what level of stimulus, like, do you have one of those 1 to 100 level collars?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's 1 to 100. I have never gone above 20 for any dog. Jesse needed a 20. Mikey only needs like a 5 because he's just a baby.
Yeah.
And just for comparison, like the 20 feels about like a bee sting or maybe like a vaccine.
Yeah.
If you got your COVID vaccine, kind of about like that. So it's not, I'm actually kind of surprised for Jesse, especially how little of a shock he needed, because I mean, he was a tough dog. He was a dog that got bit in the face by a rattlesnake and didn't back down. He continued killing the rattlesnake.
Oh.
So I was honestly surprised that that little of a shock would have that kind of an influence on his behavior.
Yeah.
Because I know that he has, endured more painful things and kept doing what he wanted to do. And Mikey too, he went under a barbed wire fence chasing deer one time and he cut himself open like from shoulder to hip.
Oh.
And he, like, while we were still hiking, I was like, he didn't even notice that he'd been hurt. But as soon as we got back to the car and he laid down and got some water, it was like all of a sudden the adrenaline wore off and he felt it and he started to cry. He's like, oh, baby.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're pretty tough dogs. So I'm honestly surprised how little it took to affect their behavior.
I mean, I'm assuming that maybe there was less adrenaline in their system when you applied the shock than when, for example, was it Jesse or Mikey was fighting the rattlesnake or chasing the deer? Yeah. I mean, I see the same in my dogs. Sometimes, because I go hiking all over the place, and sometimes they get hurt in some way, and I don't even know how, because they don't show me when it happens. I only realize when I see, oh,
yes,
you like, what happened to you? But the dog won't show anything. There was no yelp. There was no nothing. And only once we get back home, I might see a reaction of, oh, the dog is not behaving the way they would usually behave.
Yeah.
I mean, also, like, I have a breed that is bred to endure. Well, their genetics. My Malinois, for example, is from KNPV lines. That's a pretty tough fight sport, which is often trained with high level corrections. The pain tolerance of individuals is just very different.
Yeah.
And Game here, she has a very high level of pain tolerance. And if you add adrenaline to that, I really think she doesn't even notice when she hurts herself out on a walk. But when the adrenaline wears off and there's nothing better to do, she will notice, right?
Yeah.
But I do think there's genetics, and in in Coonhounds and any hunting dog breed.
Yeah. And one thing I've learned with Coonhounds is you've got to check their feet, because they will run the pads off of their feet and never slow down, never limp.
Yeah.
You won't know about it till you get them home and then you see blood on the floor.
Yes, the same thing happens with my Mal.
Yeah.
She just won't slow down. If you're out and there's grass or something, you also don't notice. And then at home, you like walk in and you have a white tile floor. And you're like, wait, where's this blood coming from?
Yeah.
It's wild. It's hard to imagine for me.
Well, I've had the same thing happen to me on like really long hikes or trail runs a couple times. One time when I was hiking in California, got home from a hike, I was tired, but I hadn't really noticed anything wrong with my feet. But when I took my boot off, blood literally like poured out of the boot. Like I could wring blood out of my sock.
Wow.
And I had like a little stone in there that had just been like rubbing on the bottom of my foot and basically like peeled the skin off. But
Oh,
I just didn't feel it. Of course, the next day I was hobbling around complaining and whining about it. But, at the time, I guess your body just gets in a rhythm, one foot after another.
yeah. I mean, I think it depends because I think my personal level of pain tolerance is pretty low, below average. So I'm always fascinated by both dogs and people who have a much higher level of pain tolerance. I'm assuming that must be genetic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a little out of curiosity. So hound would be the correct word to describe the group of dogs that coonhounds fall into in English?
Probably scent hound.
Scent hound. Okay.
And Coonhound is not just, it's a breed name, but people will use those type of dogs for hunting, any kind of game animal that you track, not just coons.
And you could say hunting dog would also be like an umbrella term
Yeah.
that a coonhound would be under, but also a golden retriever would be under?
I don't really know a lot of people that hunt with retrievers. I feel like they usually use the term gun dog or just retriever.
Ah, okay.
Hunting dog would cover, like we have feral hog hunting in a
Yeah.
lot of the southeastern US, and hunting dog would cover like the hounds that actually track and bay up the hog. And it would also cover like people will use like big pit bulls, Dogo Argentinos, Presos,
Ah.
those kind of dogs to go actually like grip the hog
Mm-hmm.
so that they can dispatch it. And that would also cover those type of dogs.
Ah, okay, okay. And do they use coonhounds in hog hunting too? I don't know. Like I
Yeah.
have never lived in a place where there were coonhounds.
Yeah.
I have never met a coonhound in real life.
Yeah. Well, if you ever come to the States, hit me up and you can stop by and meet Travis and whoever else I have at the time.
Oh, totally. I'd love to, yeah.
Yeah, so for hog hunting, you actually like some people will shoot hogs, but it's really hard to kill a hog with a gun just because of the way that they're built. They have tiny little brains and a big thick skull.
Oh.
So the way a lot of people will do it is actually have their dogs grab the hog and then they will
Mm-hmm.
cut the throat with a knife, which
Ah.
sounds bad, but if you got a good team, it goes quick.
It sounds dangerous to me for the human hunter who only has a knife.
Because hogs are really strong, aren't they?
For the dogs, yes, it's dangerous.
For the human too. If I go up there with my knife and the hog is still like struggling in the life.
If your dogs have the hog, it's not going to get you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually went hog hunting a couple times, but I had to quit because Jesse was a pit coonhound mix, but he's small like a coonhound. His job should have been, track the hog, get it bayed up somewhere, but don't physically close with the hog.
Yeah.
However, his pit half, those instincts were like, no, I'm not waiting for these catch dogs to get here. I'm going to grab the hog myself.
Mm-hmm.
He's not big enough to do that safely. And it's not safe for one dog to try and grab the hog. Usually you have like 2 or 3 of them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah.
So he would not wait for because the catch dogs are slower, like they're coming behind with the people. He would not wait for the catch dogs. He was just like, nah, I don't need any help. I'm just going to grab this hog myself. Like we would arrive and he would already like have the hog.
Yeah.
So it's not safe for him. I wouldn't consider ethical hunting practices because then the hog is getting, bitten for longer.
Yeah.
Whereas it's supposed to be very quick.
Yeah.
Grab, hunter comes in, cuts the throat, done in like 30 seconds or less.
Yeah.
So I stopped taking him out hunting because he was writing his own rule book there. And I was like, no, sir, this is not the way things are done.
Yeah. Wow. Can I ask you something more about this?
Sure. Yeah.
We're just completely going off topic here, but I'm curious.
Sure.
So the catch dogs, the ones that are slower, those would be pits,
Mhm.
or what kinds of dogs would that be?
Usually pits. A lot of people will use Dogo Argentinos.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, I mean, catch dogs are big,
Yeah.
140, sometimes up to 160 pounds,
Yeah.
which they have to be because feral hogs can get huge. And Jesse was only like 80 pounds on a good day. So I was like, no, you can't do this.
Yeah.
You got the spirit, but you don't have the physique for this.
Yeah.
So we quit before he got himself hurt.
That sounds like a good call. So usually you would have the catch dogs, and you would also have what would Jesse's role be called?
Bay dogs. So the
Okay.
bay dogs are like hounds, or some people will use curs for it.
Mm-hmm.
They will, go out, find the scent, track the hog, and then bay it up somewhere. So hogs will try to find like kind of a protected area where they can get their backs to something and then like turn it at bay
Yeah.
and threaten the dogs to stay off. So then the bay dogs won't actually go in and close with the hog and bite it.
Oh, so the bay dog and a coonhound would also be a bay dog.
Yes.
And so their genetics tell them, yes, I want to bay that dog, but I don't want to bite it. So they would stay at a safe distance until the catch dogs come in.
Yes. Ideally, yes.
If I ever come to Virginia, will you take me hog hunting?
So Virginia, my part of Virginia doesn't really have a lot of feral hogs. We did this when I was down in the Gulf Coast.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Texas actually made a law that as long as you're not using firearms, you can hunt feral hogs year round and you don't need a hunting license. So you can just go out and do it.
Really? Yeah.
I don't know anyone that hunts in Virginia. I know people do it like down in the southeastern part of the state. So yeah, I can't promise to take you hog hunting.
Ah. Now I'm really curious. It's something that I haven't had any contact with.
Yeah.
And it sounds interesting. And it's also very different from, so my dad has a good friend who is a hunter.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Austria, as you may know or may not know, being part of Europe, has very strict gun laws and also very strict hunting laws.
Mm-hmm.
And the laws are usually to protect wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
So you're only allowed in certain seasons
Mm-hmm.
to hunt a certain amount of animals. Anyways,
Mm-hmm.
so my dad's friend used to use a breed called Deutscher Wachtelhund. I have zero idea what the word would be in English, and I don't think I have never seen one outside of Austria and Germany. It's a German breed of dog.
Mm-hmm.
And he would have that, like that dog would fight the hog, and he would do it, I think, by himself with this dog. I think he would shoot the hog then. But the dog was a single dog who would fight the hog and would often get injured in the course of it though.
I'm wondering if maybe like wild boars like you have in Europe are smaller.
That could be, I mean, in any case, they are, because I've seen them, right?
Yeah.
They are impressive. Once on a walk with my standard poodle, we encountered one, like basically really ran into it. And at first it was my standard poodle chasing the hog for like 10 meters. Then the hog would just turn around.
Yep, they do that. They turn.
Chase my standard poodle back the other way. And that was back and forth. And I was like, holy shit. It was impressive. And that they just parted ways.
Yeah.
Like it did not take very long. And I was really glad, because that could have gone out very badly for my dog or even for me. Because I'm like, well, I'm not going to interfere here. I'm going to climb a tree if it comes my way.
Yeah, and encountering a wild hog or a feral hog is really scary if it's just like you and one or two dogs.
Me and one dog in the middle of nowhere.
You really need like a pack to go after them.
It was spring, so that hog might have a baby hog, so it might be really aggressive towards people too. So I was like, okay, what tree am I gonna Thank you for going on this little hunting detour with me. I feel like I've learned a lot today. That's really interesting.
I don't want to give the impression that you can just hunt whatever, whenever in the US. It's, feral hogs are an invasive species. So that's why there's usually, no bag limits and, continuous open seasons in places where they're really bad. I mean, depending state to state, obviously. But yeah, most game species that are meant to be here and not invasive. Like the feral hogs do have, restrictions,
Yeah.
certain seasons, certain numbers that you can take.
So being an invasive species means they came from another country and somehow started without having natural predators in that area
Yeah.
to just reproduce and getting more and more and more.
Yeah. I don't think there were any native wild boars or anything like that in the United States until Europeans brought pigs over. And then, of course, pigs are pretty smart. So they escaped and set up breeding populations, and they cause a lot of problems, very destructive in areas where there's a lot of them, which is mostly down in the South. I think like Southern Virginia is kind of the extent of as far north as they can get.
Ah, interesting. I didn't realize that. Well, okay, let's get back on topic.
Yeah.
When we were going off topic on your homework thread, you mentioned that you were wondering whether you ended up going too far into the other direction with Travis.
Yeah.
What did you mean when you said that? And how have you handled Travis's off-leash hiking so far, or pre-calling all dogs?
Yeah. So I do think that it's really important for dogs to be able to have, off-leash time in nature to be able to just, be a dog. I think it's important for pretty much all dogs, but especially for a dog like Travis, that's kind of his genetic purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important to me to be able to do that, which is tricky when you have a dog that you don't have a reliable recall on, or honestly, before we took class, any semblance of a recall, reliable or not. So basically what I would do is go to, very remote areas that are not close to, any roads except just dirt roads where you can't drive faster than 15, 20 miles an hour unless you want to break your axle. And that's where we would do our off-leash hiking. He has a really good sense of direction. So like he always knows where I am. He always knows where the car is. He always knows how to find me.
Mm-hmm.
We do a lot of backpacking, and even if we're camping in a spot that he's never seen before, he never has any trouble, finding me, finding the camp when he's ready to be done for the day.
Yeah.
I think he must just track me, honestly.
Yeah.
So I would just kind of let him do his thing. And when he was done, he'd come into camp or he'd come back to the car. And sometimes I'd have to wait for him for a long time to come back to the car. Fortunately, these are pretty pleasant places to hang out, these like remote trailheads that we're using. So I would, just bring up a book and a lawn chair and just wait for him to turn up.
How long would you wait for him?
Oh gosh, sometimes hours. Usually it would only be that long if he hadn't had enough off-leash time lately. And then if I didn't want to wait for him, the good thing about him being a coonhound is, he does bay when he's tracking something. So he makes a lot of noise. So it's easy for me to just listen to him and then go grab him from wherever he's at. I guess I should mention, in case any wildlife lovers are listening to this in horror, that he never catches anything.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't even really seem to have an interest in catching anything. For him, it's all about the smell. If he sees something running, like he won't even chase it. He'll go nose down and follow the track. He's never caught anything, never killed anything or tried to kill anything. He just kind of slowly tracks things and makes a lot of noise, but he's not out there committing bunny massacres every time we hike or anything.
So he would make a great bayhound in a team of bayhounds and catchhounds.
Yes, I think he would.
Yeah. So if you had that opportunity near you, that would be great, right? But you don't have that currently.
Yeah, it's not really a thing around here. And even if I were to drive down south and do it, you need more than just 2 dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd have to team up with somebody that had additional dogs to go do it. And I don't know anyone in this part of the world that hunts hogs.
Yeah. So have you found an answer to the question whether you have gone too far the other training philosophical way with Travis since you started wondering about this?
Yes and no. What we're doing right now works for us because I'm really fortunate to be in a place where there are a lot of safe places that he can be off leash. But I mean, if I can see circumstances in which I'd have to say, you know what, no, we're just going to have to use the shot collar. He's just going to have to get through it because this is what I need to do to be able to keep him safe.
Yeah.
If we moved to a location that didn't have these remote areas nearby, I'd have to do it.
Yeah.
If we moved back down to the Gulf Coast where there's alligators in every pond, creek, and bayou, I'd have to just do it, to keep him from getting eaten.
Yeah.
And I really just see such a difference in him when he hasn't had the opportunity lately to be off leash. Even if he's getting lots of exercise every day, because we canicross, we bike together. In terms of just running, he gets as much exercise as he wants, really.
Yeah.
But he just acts different in the house. He'll run around the house. He'll baroo for no reason. He has like some resource guarding issues towards my other dog that only kind of flare up when he hasn't had opportunities for off leash time. He'll try to escape from the yard. You can just tell he's not happy. He's looking for a way to get some basic needs met.
Yeah.
So it's really important to me. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you shouldn't let your dogs off leash. It's not safe. But I mean, I do a lot of things that people probably consider unsafe. I go solo running, hiking, backpacking, camping all the time. And a lot of my friends and relatives are horrified that I do that because they don't think that it's safe. And, it's something that I need to be happy. I do it and I'm aware of the risks and I accept the risks. And I kind of feel the same way about my dogs. Like, would they be safer if I never let them off leash? Probably, yeah. Although not necessarily, because, if Travis became sufficiently determined to escape, he would eventually manage it, I'm sure. But I don't think that would be their best life.
Yeah. No, I do. I agree with you because I'm in a similar position of constantly doing things that other people might consider risky.
Yeah.
And to me, for me, this is life quality. I think that assessment is just different for every individual. But I personally, for myself, value life quality way, way, way more than life quantity.
Yeah.
So if I went hiking and I fell into a ditch and no one found me and I died there, well, at least I'd have had a happy life.
Yeah.
I truly believe that, and not everyone does, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I do also project that on my dogs because it's my own personality, and maybe you're doing a similar thing. Maybe people who would always weigh quantity over quality, they may be less likely to let their dogs off leash ever, and always wanted to keep them close and keep them confined and keep them safe.
Yeah.
And that's legit. Like in the end, we can't ask our dogs about it.
Yeah.
That's the difficult thing. For example, like I understand what you're saying when you say you feel like there's a need that Travis has and he just has to meet that need somehow, or you feel like he's not happy.
Yeah.
I used to have a border collie from Virginia, actually. And I imported him to Guatemala in order to learn about herding. So I had sheep and my own sheep, so we would do that every day. He was happy. He was chill in every other situation. It was perfect. It was his life. That's what he was bred for. That's what he loved doing. But due to circumstances, I had to move and I wasn't able to find a new place where I could have sheep. And I rehomed him to an acquaintance of mine who had sheep because it felt, of course I could have trained him and done other things with him. And I experimented with that. But I could also see he would look depressed. Like all the energy he usually had when he was working sheep, that just disappeared. He just lied around all day.
Yeah.
And I'm anthropomorphizing, but really it looked like he was depressed. Like he had no more joy for life. And also, issues would creep up that otherwise were not issues.
Yeah.
Even though I would take him hiking and this and that, but he would guard doorways, for example. And that's something he wouldn't do when he got to herd sheep regularly. So to me, it felt like the responsible decision there was to give him the life that was his best life that I could no longer provide for him.
Yeah.
And I know not everyone feels that way.
It sounds like you did the right thing.
Yeah.
We've bred these dogs for specific purposes.
Yeah.
And then we act surprised when they want to do what they've been bred to do. I mean, I say we, I mean, just like people in general.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, if you want a dog that's going to be happy just to be, you know, around the house,
Get a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel.
well, maybe not one of those because they have a lot of issues with syringomyelia, which is a painful neurological issue, and heart disease. But yeah, I mean, get a Chihuahua or maybe a Boston Terrier or something, you know, that's been bred for companionship. Like those dogs are out there.
Yeah.
But I didn't decide, hey, I'm going to go out and get a Coonhound. I just went to the shelter and picked somebody. And then I found out what I'd gotten myself into later.
Yeah. 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 But I guess your lifestyle actually is a good fit for a Coonhound.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So do you think you'll just keep giving him the freedom he has had and occasionally wait for him at the car with a good book? Or do you want to change something about that?
For right now, that's the plan, is to kind of just keep doing what I've been doing. You know, like I said, if I ever have to leave this location, you know, we really lucky to have places nearby where it's, you know, safe for me to just kind of let him go. You know, not everywhere in the US is like that. Another thing is, you know, my physical condition.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm at the point where if I have to go and get him, I can. You know, if I have to go half a mile off trail and up a steep mountainside,
Yeah.
I'm physically able to do that. Am I going to be happy about it? Not particularly, but I'm capable of it. But, you know, if anything about that changes, like I get a chronic injury or illness or something, and I don't have that reassurance that, yes, I can physically go run him down if I need to, I'd probably have to make a change.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that would be tough because just one prong collar correction really kind of rocked his world. So I'm not really sure how I would go about it if I decided that I needed to use a shock collar to put a good, reliable recall on him.
Yeah. And you do think you would need one?
Absolutely. Yeah. We've made so much progress with your class. And he surpassed my wildest expectations, and we're still working on it. But I don't think he's even choosing to disobey when he's on a scent and I call him. I think he genuinely does not hear me.
Yeah.
I think with all the training in the world, I'm never going to get to the point where I'm able to call him off of a hot scent.
Yeah.
I just don't think, you know, because they've been bred to stay on a scent no matter what. I mean, bear hounds will track a bear for days.
Yeah.
They've been bred to have that single-minded purpose. So
yeah.
Now other dogs, Jessie, I think, is another one that I don't think I ever could have gotten a reliable recall without the shock collar. Mikey, I think if I knew then what I know now, I probably could have gotten him to a pretty good recall without a collar.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if I ever decided that for safety reasons I needed a reliable recall on Travis, I'd have to go the collar route.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't even say that like I'm against shock collars because, you know, I used them on my first two dogs, never had a problem. And because of that, they were able to have so much freedom.
Yeah.
Wherever we've lived, even if it wasn't somewhere that I could get to a remote area on a regular basis, Jessie and Mikey got to be off leash pretty much every day.
Yeah.
And, you know, Travis, as things stand now, he's never going to have that because, you know, we have to drive an hour and a half to get to some place where I feel safe turning him loose.
Yeah.
You know, that's not something I can do on days that I'm working.
Yeah.
So he's pretty much stuck with only getting to be off leash on my days off.
Yeah. By the time this episode airs, I will have done an episode about negative reinforcement, and I will have talked about e-collars among other things. And I'm by no means an expert on their use. That's not my field of expertise. But there are trainers out there whose field of expertise it is.
Yeah.
So if you ever need to go down that route, I would search out one of them because you can do that in a way that does not create the fallout you've seen with the prong collar. You just need to know how, and it's not intuitive.
Yeah. I did actually talk to a trainer that uses e-collars. And the reason I sought this trainer out is because he doesn't use an e-collar on every dog.
Mm-hmm.
A friend went to him for their first dog. He said, yeah, we'll train with the e-collar. But he looked at their second dog for like 10 minutes and was like, no, we're not going to use a collar on this dog.
Mm-hmm.
So he's definitely someone who's aware of the potential for problems and doesn't, immediately jump to the e-collar for a solution for everything.
Yeah.
And he suggested maybe doing something like taking myself out of the equation completely, like use the beep on the collar instead of a verbal command and teach him to go back to the vehicle instead of to me and just have a food reward like on the bumper of the vehicle.
That's a good idea.
You hear the beep, you get to choose. You can either get a shock or you can go back to the vehicle and get food.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for him to think that I'm any part of this process.
Right.
To kind of avoid harming our relationship, which I haven't decided yet if that's something that I want to do or not. But I do think it's an interesting idea to kind of, if it doesn't work out well, at least kind of minimize any impact on our relationship.
It's a really interesting idea.
Yeah. He'll probably still figure it out because he's smart.
Yeah.
He'll probably figure it out.
The advantage of the beep might be that he might be able, because the beep is much closer than you are, so he might be able to hear the beep, even though he wouldn't be able to hear your voice, for example.
Yeah.
That would be interesting to know, because otherwise it won't work if he's not able to hear the beep.
Yeah. Well, I did try just like the vibrate on the collar to see if that could kind of like snap him out of his nose on, ears off mode. And yeah, it did nothing.
Yeah.
He didn't react in any way.
Yeah. If you ever go down the road, listen to that episode that will be out by the time ours airs, because I did some research on how to use shock collars in an ethical way.
Mm-hmm.
I learned something that I hadn't been aware of. That was that there are trainers who use it as a negative reinforcement tool rather than a positive punishment tool. And they teach the dog the meaning of the collar at a very low continuous setting before using it in real life. And I found it it's just very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, there are different ways of doing things, and that fallout that follows from coercion for some dogs can be avoided by using these potentially, but not necessarily aversive tools in different ways and like really building them up first, right?
Yeah, that's definitely something I'll look into, because 10 years ago, when is the last time that I was really using a shock collar to do training instead of just as a backup. And I think back then, the way that I did it was the more common way, but I've definitely heard more about the negative reinforcement kind of approach to it in recent years.
Yeah.
So yeah, that might be something that works for Travis. It's just, if it works out, it would be great, but it's scary to even think about giving it a try just because of what a huge reaction he had to the prong collar. Like that was really sad. I felt terrible for doing that to him.
Yeah, and what you're currently doing is working for you.
Yeah.
As long as something is working, there's no need to change it.
Yeah.
I like how this conversation took us from training philosophies to how we as humans value freedom versus safety.
Yeah.
Because I know that I myself value freedom more than safety. And I now know that you do too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that freedom versus safety is just, it's not even really an opinion. It's just kind of a basic character trait.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something that, can make it hard for people to understand where the other side is coming from.
Oh, absolutely. Just talking about human life choices. For example, what do you say about, okay, I'm going off by myself, trail running or whatever.
Yeah.
It's hard for some people to understand that this is really important to you.
Yeah.
Because they can only see the other side.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a lot of relatives who give me a lot of grief about my choices.
And I don't, like, the thing with that is I don't think you can even out-argue the person, because they,
No.
when they put themselves into your running shoes or hiking boots, they just feel fear.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they can't imagine that you're not feeling that fear. So they're
Yeah.
like, why would you choose to do that? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like they say all these points are like, oh, this could happen, this could happen. And I'm like, I mean, I don't disagree with you. All of that absolutely could happen, but that's still not going to stop me from going out into the woods and doing what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And I think my dogs feel the same way. You know, I think that if I could explain to them, like, hey, here's your options. Either you never get to run in the woods off leash, or, you know, you got to wear this shock collar. I think they would be like, put the collar on me. Let's go. Of course, I can't prove that because, you know, I can't talk to them. But I mean, their reactions, Jesse's and Mikey's, when they heard their shock collars turning on, was just like complete joy and exuberance. You know, they never, if they heard the collars turning on and went and hid from me, I wouldn't use it.
Yeah. Yeah, because it predicts off-leash freedom for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they know how to avoid it. So it's a non-issue in that respect.
Yeah. And I mean, it's especially for Mikey, I don't even remember the last time I had to shock him. I know it hasn't been since we moved to Virginia. I don't think I even ever had to use it when we were in Texas. So it would have been like sometime in 2016 would have been the last time that I actually shocked him, because he knows how to not get shocked and he chooses not to.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's an important point. Personally, I do, like, I'm tempted to agree with you on that, but I really also feel like we just can't ask them.
Yeah.
We just can't. So in the end, that's all opinions.
Yeah.
And in the end, we are always going to make the choices for our dogs that we would make for ourselves, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just got to kind of watch them and draw the best conclusions that we can from their behavior, but we're never going to know for sure.
Yeah. Well, maybe one day in the very distant future, who knows? Well, thank you so much, Morgan, for having this conversation with me. I know this can be a sensitive topic, especially in the positive reinforcement-based community.
Yes.
Because, yeah, I don't know, people in dog training get so campy. Sometimes I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why is that necessary? My area of specialty and my area of interest is positive reinforcement-based training. But that's simply because that is something that fascinates me. It really interests me. I love learning more about it, and I love being an expert in it. And you can't be an expert in everything.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I'm judging someone who goes down another path and becomes a specialist in another training philosophy. Those are just different options on a menu.
Yep.
And I do feel that both dog owners and dog trainers should have access to the full menu, and then look at it and read a little bit into it, and then make the choice that is right for them. And it is okay if my choice is different from your choice and from that other person's choice, because what is right for one dog human team is not right for every dog human team. And I feel like that's totally okay. There is really no reason that everyone would have to do things the exact same way and everyone's happiness would look the exact same way. That's just not how life works, right? It's so much more complex than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's at least as much variation between dogs as there is between people. And, you know, the spectrum of people goes all the way from somebody that thinks taking a walk around their neighborhood alone is too dangerous to people that put on wingsuits and jump off buildings for fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's okay. And I mean, I'm assuming it's even bigger in dogs because we have selectively bred them for certain purposes and we haven't done that with humans.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by different human and dog personalities. And I always love coming across new ones that I knew less about, because it makes me grow as a person and it makes me learn more. And I'm a lifelong learner, so I love that. But also, just to say to our listeners, my first choice is positive reinforcement. And this is where I'm curious about learning more, because I found my niche that is the right one for me.
But if it's not the right one for someone who comes to me and says, well, I would really like to train with tools, or I think for my dog, this other approach would be better, then I'll just recommend a trainer to them who specializes in that and who I know will be doing a great job. I don't have ethical qualms with other methods done well. I think clarity is what it comes down to. Dogs are usually content if they understand what you're asking them to do. And I can't provide that kind of clarity in all 4 operant conditioning quadrants because I don't have the knowledge. And I have no problem saying that because, I would rather be an expert in a certain field than only knowing a little bit about everything. And I feel lucky to know who to recommend for someone who wants to go down a different path. Yeah, and I feel like we should all, especially as professional dog trainers, so if you're listening and you're a professional dog trainer, I feel like that approach of just working together and recommending each other if something is out of our own wheelhouse, I feel like both our human and our canine clients would benefit from that. It always makes me sad when I see these extreme, no, this is the only way, or this is the best way to do something. You can do everything badly, but you can also do pretty much everything well. You just have to know how to, and you have to know where the boundaries of your own knowledge are, and be able to accept that. And then you can either stretch beyond those boundaries or not.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, thank you so much, Morgan, for sharing Travis's story. It was a pleasure chatting with you, and also I've loved getting to know the both of you in Calling All Dogs, and hope we'll cross paths again in the future. If our listeners want to get in touch with you, just send me an email and I'll put you in touch with Morgan.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a great conversation.
All right. Bye.
Bye.